Hey yo guys, what's up? I'm Medua, and today I'm going to be talking about how I managed to get first place on Hypixel Skyblock Bingo. Bingo is a monthly event on Hypixel Skyblock that challenges you to complete a total of 25 unique tasks that change with every month. After completing all 20 personal tasks, you are then rewarded with a so-called bingo card. It's also my favorite event in all of Skyblock, and ever since I started playing it in May of 2022, I've not missed a single one of them. So to save you guys a lot of time of me talking about the past, this in theory isn't my first bingo where I managed to get first place, not even close, as so far I've managed to complete 3 regular bingos and even the last extreme bingo as the very first person, but the change this time is unlike the others. I didn't need confirmation by an admin that I managed to get first place, but the placements finally got added onto the bingo card itself. Therefore, it sparked a lot more interest in people because it's finally being documented. This sadly didn't really get to me in January, as the December's secret bingo had a placement on the card as well, but I didn't think it would translate into regular bingos as well, as the secret bingo was some sort of one-time special bingo event. As I also had been working on my video until right before the bingo event started, I sadly had to pass on the idea of speedrunning. But now that I knew that placements are finally on the bingo card itself, I had a lot more competition and an additional reason for getting rank 1. So it all starts with one of the most important parts of speedrunning: preparation. Which also was one of the reasons that there was no bingo guide this month, but I'll try to continue with it again next month. Preparation for an event where not only the tasks are hidden until 3 days prior to the event itself, but also where you start out on a brand new profile might sound a bit hard, but there's actually a ton you can do to improve your chances of getting a good speedrun. And I'll also start out by saying that speedrunning bingo is very dependent on the bingo tasks itself, as some tasks rely heavily on RNG and factors like collection, whereas one bad high animal collection, like for example a high pork chop collection, can ruin the entire idea of speedrunning, as you can't really focus on these collections by hand, so the speedrun in this case would consist of grinding out minions who then do the job for you. It's also important to say that time itself isn't really a factor of the speedrun either, as once again, if you want a low playtime on your card, you would simply use minions and then log out to not waste any time. But luckily this month was really great for speedrunning, as it didn't include crystal hollows, at least not in the personal tasks, nor did it include dungeons, which meant that there was a lot of time to be saved on. So if the card and its tasks are compatible with speedrunning, there are certain things you can do to prepare. My preparation in this month's bingo consisted of 3 things: potions, organization, and planning. Potions. I prepared a ton of god splashes for myself, basically every splash that exists within Skyblock, to not having to wait for public splashes to happen. By the way, I'll link some discords if you're interested in public splashes down below in the description, and this let me decide when to get splashes rather than having to quit working towards tasks to get a public splash. And it also let me use the full potential of my bingo pet's ability, as the legendary bingo pet grants you more potion duration for consumed potions. Organization. As stupid as it sounds, but bingo, especially if you're speedrunning, can be a job of more than one person. And in this bingo, it was especially useful to have another person. So I got not one, but actually 2 friends to wake up as early as 6 o'clock in the morning with me, because that's when bingo starts in the EU, to help me out with splashes and other stuff we'll get into later. Here, since we're already talking about it, big thank you to Taupsi and Neck. You were an absolute insane help throughout the entire bingo. And lastly, planning. Once the bingo tasks were unveiled, I went into brainstorming mode and came up with a plan what to target first and how to continue on playing. And this was probably the biggest factor of why I ended up becoming first place. So now that I had my list of things to do and my friends waking up super early with me, I guess we'll jump right in and I'll try to explain my steps on the go. Jumping right in, I was following my 5-step guide from last video that I'll probably explain in a future video in more detail, but unlike other bingos, as I already had a splash prepared, I didn't need to wait for one. I also took Elixir's potion right in the beginning, as I forgot about night vision on my own splashes, and this already gotten me my first task: I am speed. Unlike other bingos, I also didn't talk to the weaponsmith, as he, as a garden NPC, only wants potatoes and I wasn't aiming to farming those too much. So I skipped it, as I was able to get enough money for enchanting to afford the Raider Axe that's needed for an axe to grind task right away. On the enchanting part, I also ended up getting more XP from the enchanting itself, which helped me get my bingo pet leveled up pretty quickly. During the enchanting part, I also got myself god splashed for the first time, and then I started breaking wood. This was to reach the Viking shop, which was already being opened by my friends, and after I've gotten the Raider Axe, I also fully enchanted it, except that I exchanged sharpness with Bane of Arthropods to already aim towards killing Arachne later on. And this also resulted in me completing my second task, an axe to grind. After reforging, my very first goal was to reach the Dwarven Mines. The main reason for that being the fact that the bingo 1 month prior to it also had the task Dwarven Defenders. And it's one of the tasks that's reliant on luck in a way, as the events in the Dwarven Mines are all synced up throughout lobbies and can't be forced. So my goal was to reach the Dwarven Mines as soon as possible and not miss out on a single event. On the way to the Dwarven Mines, I also talked to the Goldforger. He is by far the best NPC when you're playing bingo and garden is somehow included in the task list. After I got mining 12, I did my experiments, which sadly didn't reward me with the ground experience bottle, and then I opened up the garden island itself and started working on it. Until I realized that I lost track of my main focus, the Dwarven Mines. I got straight back into opening the Dwarven Mines with lapis, redstone and diamonds. Here I chose diamonds as reinforced was a required reforge as a task, and that's obtained through a rare diamond only dropped by diamonds in the deep caverns. I luckily gotten it during the 10 enchanted diamonds are farmed up, so I didn't have to aim for it later on. About half an hour in, I then had access to the Dwarven Mines, which was only needed to not miss out on any goblin raids, so I started clearing out my first plot. I then farmed up some jungle wood to place down my very first couple of minions. After placing them down, I headed straight back into the garden to also plant my first seeds. Here, having a friend or an alt account online, loading your garden island whilst you can do something else is super helpful, and for a speedrun, it's actually pretty vital. Whilst waiting for my first patch of seeds to grow, I started working towards my mushroom armor and the very useful cowhead. This is used for killing arachne whilst simultaneously being immune to its venom. Then I started farming. Here, it was a mixture of farming and replanting, and in the meantime also working on the second garden plot to later on at least being able to wait for crops to grow whilst also farming on the other plot. During the second crop growing phase, I've gotten even more jungle wood to even further on level my placed minions, and then I got kicked. And let me tell you, getting kicked on a speedrun is super annoying, because you literally have to sit there waiting for a minute to go by, doing nothing. But after the kick, I've gotten my first patch of loot share on sea creatures. Here again, this was only possible due to my friends helping me out, but the reason for loot sharing sea creatures was not to gain fishing XP, as this isn't possible anymore, but due to the required angler armor. And since I needed a fishing minion for that, loot sharing is much faster, at least in the early stages of fishing, than actually fishing by hand. I also gotten the healthy task in the meantime, simply by wearing my enchanted mushroom armor for the first time at nighttime. Then it went back into farming and repeated the same thing with the loot sharing. I did that until I got my first gold forger. I only talked to Jacob and the gold forger, at least those were the two only visitors I was able to get at my garden level, and I was lucky enough to get him within my first couple of visitors. The gold forger is, like I said, the best garden visitor, as you can literally buy the required materials and he always gives you 15 copper. And this is especially helpful if you're going for a replenish tool that always costs 25 copper, and getting copper early on is pretty tedious. It wasn't quite enough yet though, so I kept on farming and loot sharing until I eventually was able to craft myself the fishing minion. And whilst working on being able to place the minion, I also unlocked Minion Machine. I placed it down and gotten right back into farming and unlocked my second garden plot until I heard some good news. A goblin raid was happening. I ended up killing way more goblins than I actually needed, as I didn't know that the reward is only rewarded at the end of the event itself, but nevertheless, I got it, and I got the one task this bingo that you can't actively grind for: Dwarven Defenders. After clearing out my second plot, I continued right away with the next task, Reinforced Reforge, where I simply applied the rare diamond found earlier to my farmer suit armor. And here I also completed a Meiser task, as for some reason and some sort of bug, the personal bank didn't work, which should normally be unlocked from the get-go, at least on a bingo profile. Back into farming and foraging I went. Since this bingo's hardest tasks were cocoa bean, jungle and oak wood, I spent most of my time switching between the garden and the park, breaking trees and switching between crops. Here a major focus, at least for a bit, was sugarcane, as I wanted to be able to use enchanted sugarcane for alchemy later on to boost my skill average. After some time, to get a bit of distraction, I started working towards the spider eye collection. Here it wasn't really a hard task, but it definitely was something not to forget about. I then used an Arachne's Calling to achieve my next task, Spider Queen. This sadly also cost me a lot of coins, as like I said, the personal bank was somehow bugged and I wasn't able to deposit any of my coins. During the summoning stage of the Arachne itself, I also ran out of the boss room to farm some spiders on the side, as I was able to take advantage of not only the unlocked warp Arachne command, but also the fact that regular spiders, such as the Dasher spider, have a rare chance of actually dropping an enchanted spider eye, rewarding me with 160 spider eye collection at once. But after a couple of bosses, I went back into the farming and foraging cycle. I basically, and this is to save a ton of time talking about it, simply farmed the plot, replanted it, and then went into the park to farm jungle wood. I exchanged crops once I reached a certain level, like for example carrots, where I only wanted to reach milestone level 11, and I used the carrots to then craft them into candy. In the meantime, I also unlocked farmer whilst farming sugarcane. This continued for a while, until I ended up with another distraction, namely mining. Like stated, this month's bingo didn't require crystal hollow access, so there wasn't really any need to complete the commissions task early on, so I waited for either either Better Together event or the Gone with the Wind event to speed up breaking blocks. I was pretty lucky with the first 2 random commissions as they were both titanium, where my friends were able to help me with it, but then I sadly gotten the 350 mithril task combined with a golden goblin. This turned out to be quite okay though, as I was lucky enough to spawn the golden goblin during the mithril task, and this led me to my next completed task, Commission Master. Then I went back into farming until I decided to finish up on the spider eye collection. In the meantime of killing bosses, like I said, I ran out of the boss room during the spawn time and I actually managed to reach combat level 12, which I personally wasn't even sure I'd hit. I did, and I even passed it by a long shot, but this meant that I was able to grind out the ground experience bottle with shiny nodes in the end. Here I should probably mention that on my plan for this month's bingo, I didn't even think I'd reach combat level 12, so my main way of obtaining the ground experience bottle would have been through mining by hand or being lucky during the experiment or doing fishing. I ran into the end and grabbed myself a ground experience bottle and with it the experience task, with the very first broken shiny node. Granted, it was an obsidian node, so the chance was around about 20%, but all in all, this probably saved me quite a bit of time running around. I actually ended up reaching all the way to combat level 16 by just killing spiders, and then I finished off the spider eye collector task. After that, I've gotten straight back into farming, crop by crop, until I decided to complete the diversity task on the side. You probably guessed it, but I then warped back into the jungle, grinding out jungle wood and starting to farm again. Once I reached the cocoa beans, meaning garden level 8, I then farmed it up right before I finished the task, and I did that because I was pretty sure that I wasn't the only one going for first place, and I didn't want anyone else getting stressed out because I'm already done with the task. Then around 10,000 jungle wood before I finished the jungle wood collector task to not make my placed minions useless, I then started working on the emerald ring task. This was done pretty quickly, right up on the cards above the dwarven mine spawn, and here I also held on to the materials to craft the ring, but didn't end up crafting it to not show the completed task on my bingo card. And my thought was, this in fact is war, so don't let your enemies know what you're up to. I then started farming oak wood for the large storage and also quickly completed the fashionable task. I then decided to give up on deceiving other speedrunners and simply crafted the emerald for the green gold task. Around an hour later, I then started working towards the alchemy skill, since I was super scared that it wouldn't be enough to complete the skill average task, but I was scared for nothing, as it was more than enough to finish off the task, skill average. I then turned around to also find out that I also unlocked the angler armor recipe, and that secured me another task, namely Fisherman. After that, the only things left were yet again foraging. I crafted a large storage for extra storage, gotten back onto the jungle island to grind out the last couple of thousand jungle wood to finish off the jungle wood collector task. And then finally, to finish it all off with the most annoying task of this month's bingo, cocoa bean collector, marking 20 out of 20 personal goals completed. I quickly changed profile to check for the moment of truth, and there it was. Rank number 1. My very first documented first place on bingo. It was truly a grind, and I'm really happy that I was able to complete it right away, after setting myself the goal last month, as I was certain that there were a ton of other people going for rank 1 now that placements were actually engraved on the bingo card itself. From what I found out, I was around about an hour and a half faster than the second place, and that means I can only say one more big thank you to Taupsy and Neck and also the other friends that joined by during the bingo run and not only helped me but motivated me along the way. And I hope you guys got a better understanding of what goes into a bingo speedrun. But to make this video not any longer than it already is, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you on the next bingo guide. Yours, and now officially, bingo rank number 1.